This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. Information at vachamber.com. Virginia hospitals and health systems provide jobs. They support our economy and promote public health. Local hospitals are always open to help people with unexpected health needs. Having a stable healthcare network is vital. Virginia hospitals are our lifeline.
I just received a letter from a student who thanked me for instilling the love of math in him. That's why I teach.
Brought to you by the Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
I'd like to extend a very special welcome to Senator Mamie Locke and Senator George Barker to This Week in Richmond. Delighted to have you on. I've had opportunity before, but never with the two of you together.
Oh,
This is
exciting.
This is great. As I was looking over the connections, I see several connections. You serve on two of the same committees together, both on the Housing Commission. They'll be meeting soon.
Yes.
And both, in a way, have a Harvard connection, too, from a certificate program that you did in part of your graduate work and a degree from Harvard. So,
Yeah, she got through fast. It took me 6 years.
it did. Yeah, she got her PhD elsewhere before that. But professor at Hampton University and almost a decade in local government before coming to the General Assembly in 2004 from City Council, Vice Mayor, and Mayor Hampton. And Senator Barker, the lobbyist around Capitol Square, would like to say that before coming to the Senate that he is known to have done some advocacy work on behalf of health care.
Yes.
So you both had your routes to get here, 2004, 2008. So it's now 2017. Talk some, if you'd like, about the session just passed, or even about what's you see happening this summer and coming on into the next session of the General Assembly. So it's wide open. Senator Locke, you have 4 more years here in the Senate than
yes,
your
I have
colleague.
seniority over him.
So we will start with you. We will start with you. So you start.
I think that the session that just passed was, in terms of previous sessions, fairly innocuous. It was what you would consider an off year. It wasn't a budget year. It was amendments to the budget. Unfortunately, once again, we weren't able to get Medicaid expansion. I wish we had, because it would have given us an opportunity to provide health care to 400,000 Virginians that we weren't able to do. But we were able to, keep K through 12 safe in terms of public education, and we were able to take care of core services, for Virginians. So generally in an election year, which this is for members of the House of Delegates, we're able to come in and get out, which is always a fairly good thing, and get out on time. So as things go, it was a fairly easy session.
Senator Barker?
I would agree. I mean, it was a fairly low-key, it was not acrimonious to any significant extent. There were times when we disagreed here and there, but we disagreed amicably, and for the most part we did it pretty quickly and moved on. There were a number of bills that were vetoed, particularly a lot of the House bills that were vetoed by the governor, but I can tell you, I think it's doubtful that all of those would have passed if people hadn't known that the governor was going to veto the bills. It was sort of a safe vote. You could vote for the bill because you knew it was going to be vetoed anyway. So those types of things happen. And as Senator Locke talked about, the budget, I think, was handled very responsibly. The only frustrating part was that it was by the time we got to the end, we knew we were going to have a fair revenue growth this year. Our revenue's gone up and down tremendously over the last 16 years in terms of the growth pattern there. But and this year, actually, last year came in lower, over a percentage point lower than what had been projected, which caused a little bit of panic. The forecasts were lowered for this year. They've been increased a little bit during the year, but actually, it's now looks almost certain that we're going to run far ahead of what had actually been the original projection. And so we're probably going to be in the neighborhood of 5% or a little more in terms of revenue growth this year, which is very healthy. And so even though we didn't spend it all, we took the cautious route this year. It will provide the governor some options in terms of what he wants to do with the funds left over at the end of this fiscal year, and also will provide the Assembly, when we come down here next year, the opportunity to address some significant issues, such as state employees, teacher salaries, higher education funding.
You mentioned the Medicaid expansion, and toward the end of the reconvene day, one of your colleagues, Republican colleague, Senator Hanger, made reference on the floor to a committee that's established, I guess, by way of the budget between the two chambers. Tell us a little bit more about that. You served on finance. You both were involved and aware of that. What's the parameters of what that committee of House and Senate members will be able to do between, if they chose to, between now and the 2018 session?
Well, actually, I'm on the committee, so
okay.
so I can tell you in a little bit anyway. Although we haven't met yet, so not the full parameters of everything are not fully defined. But what it is not an opportunity to enact anything, but it's an opportunity to sort of stay apprised of what's going on at the federal level and what the implications are for Virginia, to come up with potentially some strategies to be able to deal with issues, because there has been a lot of concern if Congress does end up passing a Affordable Care Act repeal and replace piece of legislation, which now appears fairly doubtful it's going to happen anytime soon. Would have some significant implications. And part of what has been, I think, constructive in terms of laying the groundwork on it is that the Republican leaders of the Finance and Appropriations Committees in both the House and the Senate have made it clear that if the Congress did that, it likely would have very significant negative implications for both the Commonwealth of Virginia as a whole, but also for Virginia citizens and healthcare systems. And so, everybody is on board in a bipartisan way to try to stay ahead of the game, to provide recommendations to our federal representatives if need be, and to try to move things in the right direction.
So it would appear to be a real challenge, and maybe a challenge is too mild a word, that if something did happen on the other side of the Potomac prior to the 2018 session, and states were then locked in or grandfathered in at the money they've been receiving, that Virginia could be one of 19 or 20 states that could get a lower Medicaid block grant because of the not expanding.
Right.
And so I think that...
Well, it's both because of not expanding, but it's also because historically we have not, in essence, had either as robust a eligibility system for people on Medicaid,
yes.
and also we don't pay too well. We're a little chintzy on things. And so, in essence, when hospitals are taking Medicaid patients, yes, the hospitals get money, but they get only about 2/3 of what it actually costs them. So they're having to still pay or cover at least 1/3 of the cost from other types of things. Physicians and others, it's a little more than 2/3, but even the physician community, nursing homes and others are still having to take those at a net loss. What has been great is that our healthcare systems have responded, and they've been willing to deal with it to make sure that people don't go without coverage in those situations, which actually sometimes in the past did happen. But if we lock that in and get that locked in through that block grant, then we can never adequately address that.
You both served on education and health. We've been talking about health issues some. Talk some more, if you would, about the education issues.
Mm-hmm. I think that last year with the budget, we did a remarkable job with the infusion of funds into public education. And the governor did a remarkable job with that. We still have a lot to do in terms of SOQ. And one of the suggestions that was made VML, which I think we need to take into consideration, is to look at what other states are doing, and in terms of re-looking what we do with SOQ, and are we doing it the right way? And if not, rethink how we do it, and maybe there can be a different way of doing what we do. Certainly, we don't have to reinvent the wheel of how we do education funding, and reconsider how we're doing education. But the infusion of cash last year was certainly a boost to education programs in the state. And I think that with trying to divert general fund dollars in other directions, and the governor vetoing the charter schools, whether regional charter schools or state charter schools or whatever other mechanisms that were put forth to try to do that, was a positive thing for public education, because we can't continue to try to move public dollars into other ways that certainly haven't been proven to work for public schools, or to use public dollars for that purpose. Or to use scholarship funding as another way of diverting general fund of public dollars, moving that out of the public realm for purposes other than public schools. So I think that as long as we continue to kind of monitor that and ensure that K through 12 education, public general fund dollars are being used to educate children in public schools, then we're doing a good job by our children and by our teachers.
Yeah, the Board of Education, our viewers may not all know, but the Board of Education had their proposals on the SOQs that were going to, standards of quality, that were going to require additional money, and the money wasn't there this year. So you all enacted in both chambers, and the governor concurred. So actually the Board of Education now is empowered or authorized to do that this year, and to submit those then to the governor and to the General Assembly. So whether that becomes a part of the governor's proposed budget or something that you all deal with when the money committees start dealing with the budget, there's some need in those SOQs of some increased funding in certain areas, of certain staffing areas. And so that's, I heard many people around Capitol Square say it was very good that since the money wasn't there to address it at all this year, that it was changed in the code to allow it to occur in an even year, to happen this summer for the Board of Education. So whether they will come up with a different set of numbers or what they will do, we will know in several months, but they will have a significant proposal that could require some of that additional money that's coming in.
Yeah, and I think actually that may well marry up very well next year. I do expect a lot of that will be in the governor's budget that he proposes in December as he's getting ready to leave office, that we will act on come January and February of next year. And I think that it's essential that we meet that responsibility. What I can tell you, Senator Locke, I think is right on target, that what we need to do is to make sure that our public schools are functioning well, rather than trying to harm them in many ways. I represent 3 different jurisdictions in Northern Virginia. A lot of people in the rest of the state sort of have this perception that everything's fine in Northern Virginia, because in aggregate we're certainly have higher income levels than the rest of the state. But I can tell you that when I first started campaigning in Alexandria, a lot of people were complaining about the school system. Did not feel the school system was run as well as it could be, that we were not achieving results, et cetera. And we actually had a school just outside my district in Alexandria that had been not meeting state standards for 5 to 10 years, and was one of those schools that was on the takeover list, because it wasn't performing well. And there were a lot of reasons for it. Part of it was that they had all the more affluent students in that attendance area went to other schools because they had the choice. And so you ended up with a very small subset of the people who actually were supposed to go there. But with a new superintendent and things really turned around in the school system there, that school has improved dramatically. So sometimes you make the investments, you make the commitment, you get the right leadership, and you really can do things. And that's what we need to facilitate in our region and as well as statewide.
And it takes resources.
Yes. And you represent several jurisdictions in
Yeah, I have
Hampton
4.
Roads.
Yeah, and you have one jurisdiction that may do very well, which is my York County districts, but I have 3 urban core districts with Hampton, Newport News, and Portsmouth. So you're going to get variations, even within the districts,
Right.
of how the school systems do.
Right.
And as I said, it's going to take resources and a commitment to ensuring that those districts do well.
You know, neither of you representing part of the capital city, but Richmond's certainly been in the news on education about the U.S. Department of Education coming in and determining whether there's been equal treatment of those needing special services within the city. So focus on education is big wherever you are in the Commonwealth. And on the money committee side and working in both chambers, your budget provided some money for people in the far southwest and south side where they've been losing population and where their money was drying up somewhat because they were having fewer kids, but they still had to have all the teachers to
Still need
teach
the
the
same
classes.
resources.
Yes.
Yeah, and, eventually in some of those areas they may have to consolidate some schools and do those types of things, but we'll try to help them at least get through the deal with things in the short run and have to work with those systems and address some of the fundamental restructuring issues that may be necessary in some places.
Right. Well, certainly the consolidation of schools, whether it's in the urban areas
Right.
or rural areas, the kids can spend a long time in the bus
Yes.
getting to and from school. Well, what about some of the other areas that you're in? General laws and technology? Again, that's another committee that you both serve on. Senator Locke also serves on rehab and social services, and then finance is the other committee that you have. So what are some other aspects of issues that weren't resolved, let's say, in the 2017 session that you see coming up, needing to come back up or to be dealt with in 2018?
I think in rehab, one of the issues, was it rehab? I think it was rehab. We had an issue, I'm not sure it was rehab, it may have been local government, where we had to deal with an issue of where group homes, was that rehab?
No, that was local government.
That was local government, but that was an
Yes.
issue.
It was an
Yes.
issue, yeah.
And I recall it because it came out of my local community services board. Had to deal with it, and where you cite group homes,
Right.
and how where they're located, and the communities where they're located, and we had to deal with the whole issue of of NIMBYism. And not in my backyard. You can put it here, but you can't put it here.
Right.
So it wasn't resolved in this session, but I'm pretty sure it's going to come back again because community services boards are having to deal with where group homes are going to be located. And in this particular instance, it became very controversial because of where the home was going to be. And so. And because it was in a particular neighborhood, the community didn't want it there, and a comment was made to the effect that, well, it's okay if it's in Hampton or if it's in Newport News, but it can't be here. So it becomes a classic case of, discrimination. Against the mentally disabled in certain neighborhoods where there really was not a problem with the home itself, but you are discriminating against a group of individuals. So I'm sure that we're going to have to deal with that issue again.
But I can tell you a couple of things that we dealt with this year that are going to be coming back up. That we both serve on the General Laws and Technology Committee, and Senator Locke was chair of that when we were in the majority. One of the issues that we have struggled with a little bit over the last couple of years is the small women and minority business incentives and trying to help small women and minority-owned companies. In aggregate, if you look at the numbers, it looks like a lot of the contracts that are let from state go to small women and minority businesses. But once you peel it back, you find two things that are significant. One is that small is not necessarily what most people would perceive as small.
Right.
Yes.
So there are a lot of fairly large companies that are able to make the qualification as small. So a lot of them get counted as small, but really aren't the small businesses that we are most familiar with. The other is that of the percentage that goes to small women and minority businesses, nearly all of them go to small businesses. And there are very few of the contracts that go to minority-owned businesses or women-owned businesses. And so what we need to do is to make sure that all entrepreneurs and all business owners have a ready access to state funds and an ability to be able to compete for the contracts there. And that when we're awarding those to small businesses, that we are legitimately making them go to what people generally would regard as small businesses. So that's going to be an evolving type of thing and something we're going to have to continue to work on there to make the contracting system work as well. One of the other things we dealt with this year was there had been some problems with the Virginia Economic Development Partnership Program, which had been set up to be not subject to political control, so it was sort of semi-independent from the state. And it turned out that that thing created its own problems because it was not well managed and it was not subject to control by the governor or the General Assembly directly on oversight on things. And so we've restructured that, but it's going to be an ongoing process to make sure that's working well, and there may be some further changes made to the structure of that system. We need to make sure that we're doing the right things to help bring business to the community, to the Commonwealth, to help our economic development. I mean, overall, we've done a very good job, and to help small businesses get started, and which was part of what the partnership program was doing, or supposed to be doing, but to make sure that what we're doing is the most efficient and effective way to get things done, and is actually providing help to the businesses that need it.
And I think the issue of what's a trade secret is going to be addressed again, probably through the FOIA Council over the interim, because it came up a couple of times with fracking, with a couple of bills, and it came up with a couple of other issues in terms of what constitutes a trade secret, and how far do we go with that in terms of whether or not something is FOIAble. So I know that the council is going to address it in the interim as to, what does it mean to be a trade secret.
So in our last couple of minutes,
Yes.
what would you each want to tell viewers, probably what you're telling your constituents, but telling viewers around the Commonwealth, what should citizens be paying attention to or doing, and certainly not waiting until next January till the session convenes again? What would you encourage them to do?
Well, I would say, what Senator Locke talked about earlier in terms of Medicaid expansion is a huge issue. And the longer we sit on the sidelines on that and don't deal with that issue, how we provide health care services to people who are working families but don't have high incomes to be able to, and don't have employer-sponsored health insurance, that is a real issue that we need to deal with in Virginia, and we certainly have the opportunity to do it with Medicaid expansion, and it's largely, it was 90% federal money on that. And we actually, the hospital systems have already stepped forward and basically indicated they would make up the other 10%. So it's something that's not necessarily going to cost the Commonwealth anything. We just have to have the commitment to do it.
I think citizens need to start thinking about, and they really don't, is that as a citizen, they have the right to choose their legislators as voters. So they need to start thinking about redistricting. And I know that it's 3-4 years down the road, but we as legislators shouldn't be choosing ourselves in terms of being the representatives. The voters should be choosing who should represent them, not us. So a bipartisan redistricting commission is what should be, is the entity that should be doing that, not us.
Senator Locke, Senator Barker, thank you both for being on This Week in Richmond. Thank you.
Thank you.
This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community. For jobs, the economy, and public health, Virginia Hospitals, our lifeline.
The Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.